I knew my career at Quantum DX Labs was finished the second Patricia Chambers walked through those glass doors wearing a suit that cost more than my first mortgage and a smile that never reached her eyes. She looked like she'd been designed in some Wall Street laboratory specifically to gut companies and sell the pieces. I'm Nicholas Thompson, 49 years old, and I don't do TED talks or have a LinkedIn following obsessing over my every thought about disruption. I'm the guy in the back room with noise-canceling headphones writing the code that actually saves lives. I invented the surgical guidance system that made Quantum DX worth talking about. It wasn't a team effort, despite what our company website claims now. It was 7 years of my life, blood and caffeine, poured into lines of CNCUDI optimization. Military precision meets medical necessity minus a real minus. I'm AI system that could guide surgeons through tumor removal with 99.6% accuracy. Before any scalpel touched skin, my system had already mapped every critical vessel and nerve pathway. It was elegant. It was precise. And critically, it was mine. My Navy training taught me something most civilians never learn: always have an exit strategy. Before I ever signed that employment contract, I did something that makes corporate lawyers break out in cold sweats. I kept the primary patent. Quantum DX didn't own the engine. They licensed it. Think of it like renting a Ferrari engine to put in a Honda chassis. They could drive it, paint it, sell tickets to see it. But if they stopped paying rent or violated the terms, I could reach under the hood and take my engine back. Patricia didn't know that. Or maybe she didn't care to read the fine print. She was the new CEO brought in to scale us, which is business minus speak for inflate the value. Sell to the highest bidder, and leave the carcass for the vultures. She swept into the RDO ab that first day, smelling of expensive perfume and aggressive ambition, and started touching things. She picked up a prototype navigation probe, examined it like a piece of jewelry, completely oblivious to the 200 hours of precision engineering in her hands. Nicholas, right? She asked, not looking at me. She was admiring her reflection in my monitor. I love what you're doing here. Really granular stuff, but we need to think bigger. Stop thinking medical device and start thinking platform integration. Think ecosystem. It guides brain surgery, Patricia, I said. My voice flat. It's not a smartphone app. Surgeons need precision, not features. She laughed minus a sharp, calculating sound that reminded me of breaking glass. That's the engineer mindset talking. I need you to activate your business brain. We're positioning for a liquidity event. Quantum Ventures is sniffing around. $750 million on the table, but they need a clean narrative. Complexity scares money, Nicholas. We need to simplify the story. Complexity saves lives. He shot back. Every line of code in that system exists because a patient's life depends on it. She stopped smiling then. Looked at me with the kind of pity you reserve for someone trying to pay for groceries with monopoly money. The same look my commanding officer used to give fresh recruits who didn't understand that war isn't fought with good intentions. We'll work on your pitch, she said, patting my shoulder like I was her nephew. I flinched. My Navy training kicked in minus assess, analyze, prepare for contact. Trust the process, Nick. I'm going to make this company worth more than you ever imagined. The process, it turned out, involved erasing me systematically. At first, my name started disappearing from slide decks like I was being deleted from corporate history one PowerPoint at a time. The weekly engineering reviews, which I'd led for 5 years, got rescheduled to times I had conflicts with my daughter's soccer games and my son's debate tournaments. Patricia knew about those commitments minus they were blocked on the company calendar. She was sending a message. I'd walk past the conference room and see Patricia in there with the marketing team, gesturing wildly at a whiteboard covered with my algorithms drawn in wrong colors, explaining my work to people who thought Java was just something you drank. She'd simplified my neural network architecture into cartoon bubbles and arrows, turning 7 years of precision engineering into a kindergarten diagram. It was infuriating, sure. I wasn't worried about my job yet. I was the golden goose. You don't shoot the goose, right? You just pluck a few feathers to make yourself comfortable. That's what I told myself as I sat in my office, watching the fog roll in over the bay, nursing coffee that tasted like battery acid and thinking about my wife Sarah, asking why I'd been so quiet at dinner lately. The atmosphere in the office was shifting, getting heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. The junior engineers stopped making eye contact. The shared calendar suddenly had blocks labeled strategic planning that took up half the day, meetings I wasn't invited to despite being the senior architect. I remember walking into the break room and finding a printed email face minus up next to the coffee machine, like someone had wanted me to see it. It was from Patricia to the board. Legacy personnel becoming friction points for quantum deal. Need to streamline IP narrative. Handling the NT situation. Expect resolution by Q3. The NT situation. That was me. I wasn't the senior architect anymore. I wasn't the inventor of the technology that made this company worth $750 million. I was a friction point, a smudge on the lens of her perfect vision. I picked up the paper. My hand didn't shake. Minus old Navy habits die hard. I don't panic. I analyze. I folded the email into a perfect square, sharp creases, tight corners. Put it in my pocket. If Patricia wanted to play games, she should have checked who wrote the rulebook. In the Navy. We called this intelligence gathering. In Silicon Valley, they call it getting played. But the principle's the same minus know your enemy's capabilities before they know yours. That night, I sat at my kitchen table while my wife Sarah helped our son Michael with calculus homework and our daughter Em, a practiced violin in the living room. Normal family sounds. Normal life. Sarah kept glancing at me over Michael's textbook. That look wives get when they know something's wrong but their husband isn't talking. 20 years of marriage teaches you to read the weather patterns. You're quiet tonight, she said after Michael headed upstairs. Emma was still practicing scales, the notes floating through the house like a soundtrack to domestic peace. Work stuff, I said, which wasn't a lie but wasn't the truth either. How do you tell your wife that some corporate shark is trying to steal 7 years of your life's work? How do you explain that the college fund and the mortgage and the comfortable retirement you've been building might disappear because you trusted the wrong people? The new CEO? Sarah asked. She'd met Patricia at the company holiday party, spent exactly 5 minutes in conversation with her, and came away with an opinion she'd kept to herself until now. She strikes me as someone who'd sell her own mother if the price was right. That's when I knew I wasn't imagining things. Sarah has incredible instincts about people. If she was picking up predator vibes from Patricia after one conversation, my gut feelings were probably conservative estimates. Something like that, I said. Let me explain the soft lockout phenomenon. It's not as dramatic as changing the door locks. It's 1,000 tiny cuts designed to bleed your authority dry until you're just a ghost haunting your own cubicle. Started with the Slack channels. One morning, I grabbed my phone and noticed the leadership minus score channel was gone. Just vanished like it never existed. When I messaged DeAndrew, the DevOps lead I'd personally hired and trained from a junior position for years ago, he took 3 hours to reply. Hey Nick, Patricia restructured communications architecture. Streamlined decision minus making. You're an engineering minus general now. Engineering minus general. That was the channel where interns posted memes about caffeine and asked where the spare USB cables were. I'd been demoted from the cockpit to the cargo hold without a single meeting, without a single conversation, without even an email notification. Just quietly shuffled aside like yesterday's newspaper. I walked into the office that day and the silence was deafening. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and everyone stops talking. It was that, but constant. An ambient frequency of guilt and awkwardness that followed me through the hallways like a cloud. My team minus people I'd mentored, whose kids' graduation photos were on my desk, whose careers I'd personally shepherded minus would suddenly become fascinated by their screens as I passed. They all knew something was coming. And survival instinct in Silicon Valley is stronger than loyalty. When the CEO sharpens the axe, you don't stand next to the tree. The funny thing about corporate warfare is how polite it stays on the surface. Nobody screams. Nobody throws chairs through windows. They just slowly, methodically erase you from existence while smiling and asking about your weekend. Patricia was a master of this art form. She'd nod respectfully in meetings while systematically removing my access to decision-making. She'd compliment my technical skills while explaining to investors that we needed fresh thinking for the next phase of growth. Then came the junior analyst incident. Jennifer was 24, wore business casual like a uniform, and had the technical depth of a puddle in a heat wave. She was Patricia's nascent innovation coordinator or some such meaningless title that probably came with equity and a corner desk she hadn't turned. I was in the kitchen staring at the espresso machine, like it might reveal the secrets of the universe, when Jennifer bounced in with the kind of energy that only comes from never having been truly tested by life. "Hey Nicholas, quick question," she chirped, oblivious to the fact that I was radiating due minus not minus disturb energy and frequencies that should have been visible from space. "I am cleaning up the metadata on the slide deck for the quantum due diligence team," Patricia said, "to make sure all the IP attributions are consistent. I saw your name on the legacy docs, but I can just find minus and minus replace that with Quantum DX proprietary holdings. Right? Just to keep it clean." My blood ran cold. Not hot minus cold. Liquid nitrogen cold. The kind of cold that comes when you realize someone is about to steal your life's work and they're asking your permission to help them do it. "Jennifer," I said, my voice terrifyingly calm in the way that made junior officers in the Navy immediately stand at attention. "Show me the deck." She pulled up her iPad with the casual confidence of someone who'd never made a real mistake in her life. "Yeah, see. Patricia put a note here. Assert full corporate ownership. Remove founder liabilities. Clean narrative for acquisition." I looked at the slide. It was a diagram of my neural network architecture. Specific recursive loops and feedback mechanisms that made the whole thing work. The mathematical precision that had taken me 18 months to perfect, reduced to boxes and arrows like a children's coloring book. And right there in bold Helvetica, property of Quantum DX Labs, wholly owned subsidiary. She wasn't just erasing me from the history books. She was legally claiming ownership of the land my house was built on. Under the terms of our license agreement, Quantum DX had exclusive usage rights, not ownership rights. Claiming ownership to a third party like Quantum wasn't just a lie minus. It was material breach of contract. It was fraud. And Jennifer had just handed me documented proof. "Interesting," I said, my Navy poker face in full effect. "Jennifer, could you email that to me? I want to double minus check the formatting before it goes out." "Sure thing," she said, happing away with the efficiency of someone who genuinely thought they were being helpful. "You're the best, Nick. Patricia said you'd want to make sure everything was perfect." Poor Jennifer. She had no idea she'd just handed me the ammunition to execute her aunt. I went back to my desk and waited for the ping. There it was. Quantum Pitch V6 FINALPPTX. I didn't scream. I didn't storm into Patricia's office and flip her sending desk. I opened my personal email minus, never used corporate email for the kill shot minus, and forwarded the file to my lawyer. Catherine Walsh, a woman who makes great white sharks look like goldfish and charges accordingly. My message was 3 words: timestamp this breach. Catherine replied in 2 minutes: received. Clause 7 violation confirmed. Execute revocation? I stared at the blinking cursor. In the Navy, we had a saying: slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Rushing into action gets people killed. If I pulled the license now, the deal would collapse and Patricia would spin it as me being a difficult old minus timer who sabotaged the company out of spite. The business press would eat that story alive minus disgruntled engineer destroys company over ego. I needed her to commit fully. I needed her to stand in front of the world and lie so boldly there was no walking it back. I needed the humiliation to be absolute and her culpability undeniable. I typed back, wait. Let her dig the grave deeper. The next few days were surreal. I sat in meetings where they discussed the future of the product without consulting the person who built it. I watched Patricia strut around the office, high on the fumes of a $3 billion deal, acting like she'd personally invented artificial intelligence. She bought a gong, an actual brass gong that she set up in the main area near the kitchen. Every time they cleared a hurdle with the due diligence team, She'd bang it like some kind of corporate shaman summoning the spirit of disruption. Gong. Legal review complete. Gong. Financial audit passed. Gong. Technical documentation approved. Every bang was a nail in her coffin, but she was too intoxicated by her own success to see it. She thought she was conducting a symphony. She was actually playing funeral dirges. She was so confident, so absolutely certain that she'd outmaneuvered some simple Navy engineer who didn't understand how the big leagues worked. She thought I was just another technical founder who could be bullied into silence with legal threats and corporate doublespeak. She thought my silence was submission, that I was broken and defeated, quietly accepting my fate like a good soldier following orders. She didn't understand that for an engineer minus, especially one with military training minus, silence isn't empty. Silence is processing power. Silence is the system compiling the code before the execution command runs. Silence is the moment before the missile finds its target. During this time, I started getting messages from my team. Andrew, the DevOps lead, would send me technical questions he already knew the answers to, just to maintain contact. Other engineers would find excuses to stop by my office, ostensibly to discuss code reviews, but really to let me know they hadn't forgotten who built the foundation they were standing on. Even Jennifer, Patricia's niece, started looking uncomfortable whenever she saw me in the hallways, like she was beginning to understand that corporate politics had real casualties. The irony was that Patricia's behavior was making my case for me. The more she celebrated, the more she marginalized me, the more obvious it became to everyone that she was trying to steal credit for work she didn't understand. She was so focused on the performance of leadership that she forgot leadership actually requires substance. She called me into her office late on a Thursday. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the glass walls like prison bars. She didn't offer me a seat. I stood there in my standard uniform minus dark jeans, black polo, boots minus, while she sat behind her desk in a power pose. She'd probably learn it in some executive coaching seminar. "Nicholas," she said, leaning back in her chair with fingers steep-lead like a villain in a bad movie. "We need to talk about transition." "Transition?" I asked, playing dumb. "In negotiations, make them say the ugly parts out loud. The deal closes next week," she said with the casual confidence of someone who'd never been truly challenged. "Quantum wants a fresh start, and frankly, your salary is heavy for the organizational structure we're building. We need you to sign a release. Graceful exit. We'll give you 6 months severance, and you sign over any residual IP claims, just to tidy up the paperwork. 6 months severance." After 7 years of building their entire business model, after creating the technology that made them worth $750 million, she was offering me pocket change to disappear quietly while she took credit for my life's work. "And if I don't?" I asked, keeping my voice level. She smiled that shark smile, the one that probably worked on Junior V, CS, and impressed board members who'd never built anything themselves. "Can we terminate for cause? Insubordination. Failure to adapt to new leadership paradigms. We'll bury you in legal fees until you're selling that patent for scrap metal just to pay your lawyers." She was threatening to fire me. She was threatening to fire the patent holder. It was so breathtakingly stupid I almost laughed. She was essentially threatening to shoot herself in the foot and then demanding I provide the ammunition. The arrogance was so complete, so total, that it approached a kind of corporate insanity. "I'll think about it," I said. "You have until the all-minus-hands meeting tomorrow," she said, already turning back to her computer like I'd been dismissed. "Don't make this ugly, Nicholas. You're a good engineer. But this is business. Nothing personal. Nothing personal." She was stealing 7 years of my life's work, destroying my reputation, threatening my family's financial security. And it was nothing personal. That's when I knew she'd never served in anything larger than herself. In the military, everything is personal because lives depend on it. In Patricia's world, other people were just assets to be optimized or obstacles to be removed. "I wouldn't dream of it," I said. I walked out of her office. I didn't go home. I went to the server room, the hum of cooling fans wrapping around me, like the comforting white noise of a ship's engine room. I sat there for hours, watching the status lights blink in their eternal rhythm. Green, green, green. Everything working perfectly. Tomorrow, those lights were going red. The main conference room at Quantum DX was called the Fishbowl minus a glass minus, walled monstrosity designed for transparency, but actually serving as a theater for public executions. Today, the entire company was crammed in there for the strategic alignment all minus hands. Patricia stood at the head of the table, flanked by board members who'd flown in for the pre-minus acquisition celebration. They looked like vultures in Italian suits, picking at catered pastries while waiting for the carcass to be officially divided. Patricia was practically vibrating with energy. She had the look of someone who believes they're about to become a god, or at least significantly wealthier, which in Silicon Valley amounts to the same thing. I stood in the back, leaning against the wall. I wore my usual uniform minus dark jeans, black polo boots. I wasn't dressed for a funeral, but I was definitely dressed for demolition. Team, Patricia started, her voice projecting without a microphone. We stand on the precipice of history. Quantum Ventures has recognized what I've been telling you for months. Quantum DX isn't just a company. It's a paradigm shift. A new way of thinking about medical technology. A few people clapped, mostly the marketing team and some newer hires who hadn't figured out the game yet. My engineers looked at their shoes. They knew the technology was solid, but they also knew paradigm shifts were mostly smoke and mirrors built on top of other people's hard work. To get here, Patricia continued, pacing like a caged cat, we had to make tough choices, trim the fat, pivot from a research minus first mindset to a growth minus first mindset. We had to stop thinking like engineers and start thinking like entrepreneurs. She stopped pacing and turned slowly, deliberately, until she was facing me. The room went silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming, the distant sound of traffic, the collective held breath of 50 people who knew they were about to witness something ugly. Nicholas, she said, using just my first name like a disappointed parent addressing a child. You've been with us since the beginning. You wrote the original code. You built the foundation that made this company possible. And for that we thank you. She paused for effect. This was it. The performance she'd been rehearsing in her head for weeks. But, she said, her voice dropping to a theatrical hush that somehow made her sound more vicious than if she'd been screaming. What got us here won't get us there. We need visionaries. Not just technicians. We need people who understand that a patent is worthless if it doesn't scale. You've been resistant to change. You've held onto old ways of thinking. You think like an engineer in a laboratory, not a businesswoman in the arena. My face burned, but I kept my expression neutral. Stone mask. Navy training. Let her talk. I thought, let her put it all on the record. Let her commit to the lie in front of witnesses. I offered you a generous transition package. Patricia said, lying through her teeth in front of 50 people who knew exactly what she was doing. You refused. You threatened to hold the company hostage over technical details that our legal team assured me weren't on minus issues. Murmurs rippled through the room. She was painting me as the villain. The greedy founder standing in the way of everyone's payday. The difficult engineer who couldn't accept that his time was over. So, she said, straightening her jacket with the satisfaction of someone delivering a killing blow. Effective immediately. Nicholas, your employment is terminated. For cause. Security will escort you out. She gestured to the door. The security guards were already waiting. The choreography was perfect. She wanted this visual minus, the old guard being physically removed to make way for the new. The past being literally escorted out so the future could walk in. I looked at the board. They watched with the cold indifference of people who'd seen this performance before. They didn't care who built the engine as long as the car sold. I looked at my team. Jennifer looked like she was going to be sick. Enru gave me the tiniest, almost imperceptible nod minus a signal that he understood what was really happening. I pushed off the wall. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't launch into a speech about how I invented the very air they were breathing. You're making a mistake. Patricia, I said. My voice was quiet, but in the silence of that room, it carried like a gunshot. The only mistake, she sneered, was thinking we needed you this long. Your patent is company property, Nicholas. Read your contract. Now get out. The irony was so rich I could taste it. She'd just committed fraud in front of 50 witnesses while telling me to read a contract she'd obviously never bothered to understand herself. I picked up my bag, walked past the table of vultures, walked past Patricia, who was already turning back to the room, dismissing me like an ant. I felt every eye in that room on my back. They expected me to fight. They expected a scene. They expected the engineer to break down or lash out or make some kind of desperate last stand. Instead, I walked to the door. The security guard reached for my arm. I sidestepped him with the precision of someone who'd spent years in military drills. I know the way, I said. As the elevator doors closed, I saw Patricia raising a glass of champagne, laughing at something a board member said. She thought the game was over. She thought she'd won. I pulled out my phone, opened the encrypted chat with Catherine. Nicholas, she did it. Public domination for Cosand explicitly claimed patent is company property in front of the board. We have witnesses. Catherine, she's dead. Execute revocation. 24 minus our clock starts now. I walked out into the California sun, took a deep breath. The air smelled of eucalyptus and freedom and the distant possibility of justice. I had 24 hours to wait. Then the world would burn. What happened next was exactly what you'd expect when an unstoppable corporate ego meets an immovable patent law. Patricia's world came apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. The license revocation triggered a cascade of legal disasters that made her termination look gentle by comparison. Quantum Ventures walked away from the deal within hours. The board fired Patricia before lunch. The company's stock became worthless overnight. But here's what really mattered. I got my life's work back. All of it. The patents, the code, the data. The 7 years of innovation that some Wall Street predator thought she could steal with a smile and a press release. I hired back Andrew and most of my original team. We started fresh, clean, without the corporate parasites trying to optimize our engineering for their profit margins. 6 months later, Patricia was selling insurance in Phoenix. And me? I was back in the lab, writing code that saves lives, surrounded by people who understand that some things are more important than quarterly earnings reports. Real power doesn't announce itself with gongs and press conferences. It simply acts with precision at the right moment, when the target has nowhere left to run. In corporate warfare, the most dangerous enemy isn't the one who screams threats minus. It's the one who reads contracts and remembers that real power comes from owning what others desperately need. They mistake silence for weakness, patience for surrender, and technical expertise for expendable labor minus, but engineers built the world they're trying to rule. And we always keep the blueprints.